Welcome to the Halacha podcast, Leman Yishmu, with Harav Yosef Yeshaya Braun, Mara Da'asra, and a member of the Crown Heights Beis Din. This podcast is brought to you by the Ask the Rav platform, in partnership with Leman Yilmedu, the premier institute for practical halacha learning.
Welcome to our next Leman Yishmu podcast, together with Ask the Rav. So a question I've been asked recently, there are some people that are particular, l'kavod Shabbos, they want to make sure that the knives, particularly the Challah knife, should be a non-serrated knife. The standard knives that we use to cut bread are serrated knives. They're not straight, they're not smooth on the bottom. And some people are particular, they have to want to get a flat, smooth knife. Is there a source for this? Do we need to be particular about this? So while some are particular, the answer is no, there's no halachic requirement as such, and as we will explain why there's no reason to be concerned about this. The source seems to be the posek. It's brought down in Halacha, in the Kolba, in Beis Yosef, the Ramad, Alter Rebbe talk about the halacha of sharpening knives for Shabbos. The kavod Shabbos, to make sure your knives are sharpened. Now there are certain sources, the Korban Shabbos, the Chesed LaAlofim, the Chesed LaAvram, Reb Chaim Palaji in his Sefer Kaf HaChaim, who we've quoted a lot recently. They mention to make sure that when you sharpen the knife before Shabbos, there's absolutely no pegimos, there are no defects whatsoever. So a serrated knife would be a problem. There are clearly defects in the knife. It's actually, that's the way it's made. It's made that it's not smooth. So that's the argument. We don't want to have any pegam chas v'shalom. We want to have a straight knife. Now there are circles that are particular about that. But let's examine this. So first of all, the serrated knives are a more recent invention. It's from the 1920s or 1930s. Exactly when it became popular for the masses, it's hard to know, but there used to not be such a thing. So in earlier generations, it's hard to say there was a minig not to use serrated knives. They just didn't even have serrated knives. It wasn't a common thing. So there are people that are particular about it. It's a more recent innovation, because before that it wasn't even an option. But if we think about it even further, these Sfarim talk about how al-pi Kabbalah make important that your knife has no defects. But it makes a lot of sense to say that this fact that to be particular according to Kabbalah are with those knives that are smooth knives. Now, when there's a defect, it doesn't cut properly. And since you're supposed to sharpen your knife very, very well before Shabbos, make sure not time to sharpen it so well that it has zero pegimos whatsoever. Our knives that to begin with are made with pegimos. That's how they're made. They hardly have to be sharpened. When you sharpen them, by the way, you're not supposed to sharpen them. Normally you're supposed to hone them, and even that doesn't have to happen that often. Doing it too often can actually ruin the knife. But the main thing is these knives work very well, they cut very well, and there really shouldn't be a problem with it. They're talking about a knife which has a begam. If it has a begima, it actually won't cut so well, which is why there's something about sharpening knives. There's explanations according to Kabbalah. So there's explanations according to Kabbalah work very often. It doesn't mean you have to do something with Poel Mamash. There's Yichudim El Yoinim. There's the Pnimius of the Indian. Who says that's what has to happen by Pashtus? If you look at the simple reason for sharpening a knife, the reason is so there should be shalom bias. Because if the knife doesn't cut very well, it creates problems when you're eating, and people could get into fights. And our knives, this whole thing doesn't apply. They Baruch Hashem cut very, very well. If you look at the other reason why to sharpen knives before Shabbos, because of hachana Shabbos, you're going to prepare on Friday for Shabbos, kavod Shabbos, you're preparing yourself for the eating that's going to be happening on Shabbos. According to all these different reasons, you have a Baruch Hashem, a good knife, everything is prepared, it cuts very well, there's really no reason for the sharpening altogether. There's a difference what the reason is, because maybe there's an issue dafka to sharpen it Friday morning, because hachana to Shabbos is supposed to happen in the morning. Maybe there's an Indian dafka. If it's hachana for Shabbos, maybe you should do it yourself. Mitzvah bo yosim b'shlucha. At least one of the items of Shabbos should be done by the person himself and not delegated to a shliach. If it's just for shalom bias reasons, just to make sure there's no mess up, then anybody can do it. It can happen later in the day too. But if you're looking back at these reasons, so we have a halacha about washing laundry. Ezra made a takana to wash the laundry dafka on Thursday night and Friday. There's a discussion if it applies nowadays too. But the takana is not to wash laundry. The takana is to make sure you have clean clothing. And if you have Baruch Hashem clean clothing, If you're washing, you're supposed to wash it on Thursday. If you have clean clothing, there's no reason to wash. So, if you have a knife that works, there's no reason to sharpen it. And you could argue that washing clothing, there was no takana to wash. It was that you should wash the on Thursday. Well, here also, there was no real, essentially, takana of sharpening. The same way it doesn't make sense to cut your hair or cut your nails if there's nothing what to cut. Or check your pockets Friday afternoon if you have a garment that you use only specifically for Shabbos. If you look at the Kolbay, the Alter Rebbe writes the Lashon you should sharpen bechol erev Shabbos. The Ramah takes out the word bechol erev Shabbos. They write to do it every single Friday. Now, but again, if you talk about every single Friday, that's because those knives, every time you sharpen it, becomes better and better and better. The Ches Allah writes in the name of the Mekabalim, sharpen it so well that if you could able, you man, if Ashrei Misha Yuchel Asayu, if someone is capable of actually sharpening it so well, it shouldn't have any pegimos, that would be a gewaldige thing. So the more you sharpen it, the better it is. It's like a person who takes a shower before Shabbos, l'kavod Shabbos, even though he took a shower yesterday, because he becomes more clean. But if you have a knife that was sharpened the day before and it wasn't used since, there's no point in sharpening it again. Our knives are, so to speak, as if they were sharpened the day before. There's another suggestion for the reason why to sharpen knives on the Erev Shabbos, because the Karoim had a minig. The Karoim, the Karaites, held that you're not allowed to cut anything with a knife on Shabbos. Anything they need to have cut, they would slice it on Friday. So if you take this reason, even if you take this reason, so there's a stafka in to show that we don't follow the Karaites, again, there's no point in sharpening something that doesn't need to be sharpened. That reason, by the way, is not the reason that's brought down in Pasken. That's an invented reason that happened later on. And when we have these added reasons, we have to know how to put them in context. They were added as another additional reason, which is hard to, this reason anyhow is hard to understand, because if it's to show that we're not following the Karaites, so we should dafka go and not cut on Friday what we need for Shabbos, and make sure all the cutting happens on Shabbos. There is a meaning, by the way, that some people don't cut on Fridays. They don't cut their knives on Friday of the eating. Cut their bread on Friday of the eating bread. They just don't cut it, and they slice and they rip it with their hands. It could be it's connected with this Karaite interpretation. Be that as it may, if we look at all the different reasons, there's no reason dafka that we can't use our knives that cut very, very well and everything is fine. There's another invented reason in later generations that the lailah of sharpening a knife is to make sure there's no crumbs. Well, our serrated knives are even better. They make even less crumbs than the non-serrated knives that were sharpened. Especially if you're talking about a hard challah, if it's a sourdough challah, the way they used to make it. So it's better to use a serrated knife. If you look at the Ben Ish Chai, the Ben Ish Chai says nowadays we don't use knives in our circles. And since we don't use knives, maybe there's no point in sharpening a knife, but since Chazal spoke about sharpening a knife, you should sharpen your knife anyhow. And that would imply there's dafkin in to sharpen a knife whether you need to or you don't need to. But he finishes off, because you'll always need a knife for something. You'll need it for your fruit, you'll need it for that. So it's not stop doing something garnish for no reason. In his Sefer Mekaptzil, he writes slightly differently. He writes that everything the Chazal say have a hidden secret reason. But again, that's if there's a need to sharpen, but if there's no te'elis, no benefit, no use, who says you have to do this? You want to prepare for Shabbos? There's a lot of ways to do preparation for Shabbos. Preparation and show how all the food is ready. And take your silver and polish your silver. And if you look in Pasken, there's a sefer called Seder Shana HaAchrona, which describes the last year of the Munkat Rebbe, the Minchas Elazar. A very interesting sefer, and over there, written by his Shamish, and over there, it describes that the Munkat Rebbe's grandfather, the Shem Shlomo, in his house, they never sharpened the knife before Shabbos, because it wasn't safe to have the knife sharpened. And many times we find in different places, there's sources that indicate not sharpening knives for various different reasons. And again, we spoke about that maybe Kabbalistically there's a reason to sharpen the knife. The Kavanah al pi Kabbalah goes according to the Pshat. The Kabbalah is like the Neshama and the Pshat is the Guf. So if, according to Halacha, there's no problem with our knives that are serrated because they cut very, very well, then there's really no problem according to Kabbalah also. And indeed, nowadays, the common meaning is people do use serrated knives. It's maybe Yechida school that don't use that, but the common meaning is to use serrated knives. Yeah, Mizman Lazman, you could hone them, make sure they work better. And I clarified that the Rebbe would also use regularly a serrated knife. There are some of those knives still around. Certainly in the library, the Rebbe used a serrated knife. and there's really no reason to be concerned.
A brief ad, and we'll be right back to the podcast. Every shliach is also a rav. But do you have the knowledge to answer the halachic questions that come your way? Join the Rav Kihila course with Rabbi Tuvia Kasimov. Gain the clarity and confidence to respond to the shailos your community brings you. Reserve your spot now at lamanyilmadu.com.
Let's move on to the next topic over here. So the next topic that we have at hand is, and this has been coming up frequently a lot, people asking shailos via AI, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, whatever system of artificial intelligence. Today there's Rabbanim also that use ChatGPT. We recently had a conference of quite a few Rabbanim that came together, and we met, and the topic on the table was all about AI in Halacha, for, against, Rabbanim sharing their experiences. We had a guest speaker that works in this industry, the milas, the chesronis. Now, what is indeed the problem of people using AI to pasken shailos? I've had it many times where people came to me, or they wrote to me a question, or they asked me a question, and AI gave them an answer. And Nachamazal, they actually came to a Rav to confirm the answer that they got from AI. But AI, in most cases, literally gehacked and shainik and said things that are not true. There are two parts to this question. One part of this question is, if in theory AI would be so good, and there wouldn't be any problems with it, and it wouldn't make mistakes, which they always warn you that they do make mistakes, but let's say one day, b'yomin hayom, they'll invent an AI which is perfect, straight min hashamayim, are we allowed to use AI? And then the question which I want to focus more on is not on the theoretical question, but on the practical question, how AI is being used today, unfortunately, sadly, and misleading a lot of people in severe inyanim. So first about the theory. There are arguments that have been put forth why, according to halacha, AI is not acceptable to give a psak, whether because you need to have a living dayan, a living judge, a posek, what a posek says, a psak could only become halacha when a posek, a human being, actually says so, and the neshama beguf, the software can't give us piskei dinim. Also the fact that a Rav needs many, many years of shimush, and AI cannot replicate the idea of shimush. There's the idea of siyata d'shmaya, which a computer doesn't have, assistance from heaven. The fact that Torah is Torah Sheba'al Peh, is transmitted from one generation, from one person to another, that's the foundation of Torah. And AI b'chlal doesn't give you multiple opinions. There's one answer on AI. This is the answer. I mean, you could ask it to give you multiple opinions, but AI is very confident about what it says. This is the question, this is the answer you get. So that's problems with the whole setup of the way AI is done. But even if there wouldn't be any problem, halachic, hashkafa problem with AI, in the current situation that we have today, it's really not safe to use AI for halacha. And for that matter, for many other things too. And there's no serious posek that I know that endorses using AI to get piskei dinim. I tried it myself, and I was excited and horrified simultaneously. I saw some fascinating things there, some things that I wouldn't think of myself, and I saw some mamish misunderstandings and misquotes and fabrications. Someone told me it's almost like a child that has autism, who is extremely exceptionally gifted and extremely behind in many, many different ways. So AI fabricates sources, and it says it with absolute confidence. I myself had a run-in after a number of times, because normally they tell you you're right, but it actually kept on telling me that I'm wrong. And I remember the halacha, and I sent them the source, I told them, look over here in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, look over here in Shalach, and they kept on arguing that I'm wrong. I started getting confused. When someone speaks to you with such confidence, and it's a computer, which is supposedly it's all built into the system. Make up one source, you tell them that source is wrong, they go back and give you a new source. You tell them that source is wrong, give you another source. So it gives you a lot of wrong, literally, sources, quotes that are incorrect. It's also trained through the internet. It's trained through secular values, and sometimes it actually has bearing on halacha. If you really need to, then you're allowed to. But there's no such thing in halacha. If you really need to, you're allowed to. In certain cases, there's such a thing. Why are you doing it? Because this is important for you? Certain values which are really anathema to Torah, and that's how it bases its opinion. It also doesn't know the person that's asking the question, and in halacha, it makes a big difference who is the person asking the question. And as a future model, if communities will start using AI for Piskadinim, we could have in the same community, really, a fractured community. There's no authority that's going to resolve all the differences, because one person is going to use his model of AI, another person is going to use a different model of AI. But these are all extra stuff. The main thing is that in its current state, it's certainly absolutely dangerous. And I know for a fact, you have people that are regularly being misled with Piskadinim and Inyanim of Chayve Krisis, quite serious things, which are highly problematic. There's a lot of positive to it. There's a lot to be said about the positive that it provides. They used to say that the computer, the lailah, is bekiyus, not havana. Nowadays, it's the havana, not the bekiyus. It analyzes things very, very well, but the information sometimes is totally off.
A brief ad, and we'll be right back to the podcast. Shabbos comes once a week, and you've probably told yourself more than once, it's time I learn Hilchos Shabbos. Well, now the time has come. Join the Hilchos Shabbos Halacha L'Maaseh course with Rabbi Yossi Barber and learn the halachas clearly and practically. For details and registration, visit lemanyilmedu.com.
Let's move on to another topic altogether. We've been talking a lot recently about the Sefer Kaf HaChaim of Reb Chaim Palaji that recently was discovered. There's notes that the Rebbe Rashab made on his personal copy of the Kaf HaChaim. They took it with him when he was traveling. It was a small-sized copy, and he made some notes. And recently, Baruch Hashem, they've been published, and there's a lot of interesting, fascinating things there. We dedicated an entire podcast just on the Kaf HaChaim of Reb Chaim Palaji with the Torah Shalom HaGoyis on that. So I want to focus on one other topic from that Sefer and on the Rebbe Shab's HaGoyis. But first, we'll talk about a general question in Halacha. The Bracha of tzitzis. We have a tallis gadol and a tallis katan. So the Bracha of tallis katan happens to be quite controversial. Some sources say we actually should be making a bracha lis atev b'tzitzis. That's what Alter Rebbe writes in his Siddur. He mentions it in Shulchan Aruch also. In our Siddur, we have the bracha al mitzvah tzitzis. And the question of al mitzvah tzitzis is really an authentic bracha, because the bracha should be on the action of the mitzvah, not al mitzvahs. So, when it comes to making a bracha on a tallis katan, married men have an option. Married men have a tallis gadol as well, and they can make a bracha on the tallis gadol, and the tallis gadol could be covering the tallis katan as well. And in practice, a married man who has a tallis gadol should not make a bracha on his tallis katan, only if these conditions are there. Number one, in order to make a bracha on a tallis katan, the person has to change his tallis katan during the day. If you're wearing the same tallis katan, you can't make a new bracha. You don't continuously make a bracha on a mitzvah unless there's a switch in the middle. Number two, you need to make sure your tallis katan has the proper shear. Unfortunately, a lot of tallis and katanim are not the proper measurement. The tallis gadol is big, it has a measurement, but the tallis katan is not necessarily so. Number three, when you put on the tallis katan, usually it's in the morning, sometimes the person's hands are not clean. It has to be in a way that you don't have to wash your hands right now, because then you can't make a bracha. It has to be in a place, the person puts it on in the bathroom, you can't make a bracha there. So if a person puts on his tallis katan in a time or place, a situation, then he can't make a bracha. If he's a married person, he'll just make a bracha on his tallis gadol and cover the tallis katan. Why do you need to make an extra bracha on the tallis katan? Also, if you're putting them on one after another, you put on the tallis katan, and right afterwards, the tallis gadol, without a proper interruption, in between, this runs into a shailos, a bracha, shein tzaricha, unnecessary bracha. Why do you need to make two brachas on the tallis katan and on the tallis gadol? Make one on the tallis gadol. If any of these conditions are absent, you just make a bracha on the tallis gadol, and you have in mind this will exempt the tallis katan too. There are, however, those that married people that never make a bracha on the tallis katan, even if they put it on in a clean place, and even if they know it has the shear, whatever, they're making a tallis gadol. What do they need to make this tallis katan bracha? So they always just making a tallis katan gadol, and have in mind it should cover the tallis katan. The only time they'll make a bracha on the tallis katan in the rare situation where they already daven shachris, they already made the bracha on the tallis gadol, and now during the day, for whatever reason, they're going to change the tallis katan. So now they have no way to have a bracha exempting the tallis katan. A practical case is people who have a separate pair of tzitzis for Shabbos and a separate pair of tzitzis for the week. They go Friday afternoon to the mikveh, and they come out of the mikveh, and they change from their weekday clothing to the Shabbos clothing. And now, Erev Shabbos in the afternoon, when they're putting on their tallis katan, here's an opportunity for them to make a bracha, again, assuming that it's has the right shear, etc. So, if this discussion about not making a bracha on a tallis katan, if you look into Hayom Yom, which we just had on Yudal Siv not so long ago, it's quoted afterwards on Sefer HaManhagim as well. But there it comes out that if a person puts on a tallis katan in a time and place that you could make a bracha, then make a bracha on the tallis katan. If it's in a time and place that you can't make a bracha, then you'll rely on the tallis gadol, provided you're a married person who wears the tallis gadol. That's what it says in Hayom Yom. In this new Hagoyas Todah Shalom to Reb Chaim Palaji, it seems to imply, from the Ksaviyat Kodesh of the Rebbe Rashab, it seems to imply that people always make a bracha on tallis katan. That's the implication there. We'll get back to that in a moment. There's a third source, Igris Kodesh of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe writes a letter to someone, and he says that it's already been ruled that we just always make a bracha on the tallis gadol, and that's it. Now that letter, you can argue, is maybe not Hayra l'Rabbim, is not for the public, but the lashon the Rebbe uses of kvar pasku, it's already been ruled. In other words, the Rebbe is not saying his own personal Hayra to someone. This is something which has been ruled by the Achronim, and they are indeed Achronim, the Eshlavram, Chuvas Maria Ashkenazi, the Munkach and the Mukher Chaim. Quite a few Achronim say there's a lot of reasons why B'chalal we should avoid making a bracha on tallis katan. Whether because our tallis katan is too small. One of the shiurim of a beged is that you're comfortable walking to the street with such a beged as a proper beged. A tallis katan is too small. Our size of tallis katan is small that people are embarrassed to walk with that in the street. The way our tallis katan is, you can't wrap yourself with it, and many other reasons they provide why we should try to avoid making a bracha on a tallis katan. To say that this letter that the Rebbe wrote is not a lesson for the public is hard to say, because the Rebbe wrote this to a person who was putting out a siddur, and his siddur had an in halachas, and the Rebbe was telling him, do not print in your siddur an instruction to make a bracha on a tallis katan, because a siddur which has halachas and chlal halachas, piskei dinim, especially a siddur, has to be bottom line pile mamish, and bottom line pile mamish, the ruling has been not to make a bracha on a tallis katan. It doesn't fit in so well with the Hayom Yom. But there were definitely chassidim that said that the own that had this minig, they never made a bracha on tallis katan except on Friday afternoon when they changed, which it says in many Sfarim you're supposed to change your tallis katan for Shabbos. The Challah says you're not supposed to wear Shabbos, what you wear during the week. The Alter Rebbe brings a minig to have a special tallis. Seems like he talks about a tallis gadol for Shabbos. So, how do we resolve the Hayom Yom and the Igros Kodesh? I don't know. But even according to the Hayom Yom, a bracha on a tallis katan is only if you switch it every single day. It has a proper shear. You're putting it on with clean hands and a makam tahor. Not everybody has all those opportunities. But now we're going to move on to another question associated with the tzitzis and back to the Torah Shalom as well. People who do make a bracha on a tallis katan, whether married people who are not following the position of always just making a bracha on a tallis gadol, there's among Chassidim, there's two different minhagim. So those that follow the Igros Kodesh approach and always making a tallis gadol, and those that follow the Hayom Yom and Sefer HaManhagim approach, which is depending on circumstances. Sometimes they're making a tallis katan, sometimes they don't. So, but unmarried people just have a tallis katan. So they make a bracha on a tallis katan. Now, how do they go about this? If they have if a person has a night tzitzis, and then they have a day tzitzis, they can make a bracha in the morning. On the day, they change from the night tzitzis into the day tzitzis. They can make a bracha on the day tzitzis. The problem, however, with doing that is that means the tzitzis you're wearing at night is what we call a kesus lailah, a garment which is designated for the night, which according to some opinions is not chayv tzitzis. And since you want to have the idea of wearing tzitzis at night, if it's not obligated tzitzis, that means you're not wearing tzitzis at night. So the Tzemach Tzedek writes in Peskei Dinim, and the Rebbe brings us down in his Aris that he wrote on Sefer Shara HaKol of his grandfather. The Tzemach Tzedek writes in Peskei Dinim, you should not have a tzitzis special for the night, a night tzitzis, shlaf tzitzis like some people have. No, you should have a tzitzis that's for day and night together. So the best thing would be to change your tzitzis every morning, and then wear it every 24 hours. In the morning, you change your tzitzis and wear it for the day and for the night, and you change it the next morning. If a person is married, he'll wear the same tzitzis for many days straight, and he'll just make a bracha on tallis gadol, or he could do the same and switch it every morning like an unmarried person. Some people rather change it at night. They'll change it at night. Every night they'll change it. But that's not such a smart idea. So you're not making the bracha when you're changing it. You'll have to wait till the next morning to make the bracha on it, which isn't such a good idea. And in this case, it's also not so simple, because that means it's a garment for the night that you continue to wear throughout the day. So that's not a recommended thing. Some people have reported a rumor that the Friedrich Rebbe said to a particular chassid, Reb Nachman Lafkovsky, when he gave to this question, when do you make a bracha on your tzitzis you had? You wore the tzitzis, if you're following the Tzemach Tzedek, and you wore the tzitzis last night, you continue into the day. So if you changed them in the morning, the tzitzis, that's very simple. But if you didn't, when could you make a bracha? So there's a rumor in the name of the Friedrich Rebbe that he said, well, you go to the mikveh. Now you took a break. You took off your tzitzis. Now you put tzitzis on. That's a rumor. It's very hard to rely on rumors. The Rebbe has a letter with the Rebbe's Medaik in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch that's a separation for tzitzis, an interruption that requires a new bracha, is kama shoyes, is more than an hour or two. Going to the mikveh is much shorter than that. And although you can actually go into the mikveh with your tallis katan on you, that's some form of interruption, but it's not an isser. And anything which is not an isser, Pasken clearly say that washing is not a hefsek for the bracha of a tallis or tallis katan. They bring the Arizal would make a bracha after he went to the mikveh, but there's many ways to explain the Arizal. He spent a lot of time in the mikveh, he had his kavanas, whatever the explanation is, maybe he's talking about it as a different tallis. The common meaning is that people do not make a bracha after they take a shower and after mikveh. And it's not clear what the Friedrich Rebbe said. It doesn't align with what we know that the Friedrich Rebbe told her of Chadakov slightly differently. That doesn't go along with the Seirah. And it's a rumor, and we don't know exactly to authenticate this rumor. In this Torah Shalom, there's even a bigger chiddush. In this Torah Shalom, it seems like no hefsek whatsoever. After you sleep at night, you wake up in the morning, you check your tzitzis, the same tzitzis that you slept at night, check it, and you can make a bracha without any hefsek whatsoever. Which is very, very hard to understand. There's two ways how to understand what the Rebbe Rashab is talking about. He's talking about if people take it off and put it back on right away, or is he talking about if you just slept with it and you didn't even take it off? So the Friedrich Rebbe required, according to this rumor, a break of going to the mikveh. At least there was some break. Over here, it's taking it on and putting it off, or maybe not even taking it off altogether. Which is hard to understand. This doesn't align with the Piskadinim of the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch and the Siddur. There's ways how to resolve this, and I don't want to go into arichas over here. We wrote a lengthy post about this on the website and Ask the Rav. You can have a look over there. There's a button called Hagoyes Torah Shalom on Chaf HaChaim Palagi, and we spoke over there about a svara that maybe if you make the bracha al mitzvah tzitzis, which is what we do today, the Alter Rebbe did not print the bracha al mitzvah tzitzis in his siddur. In the Tillis Hashem siddur it's there, but not in the original Alter Rebbe siddur. If you make the bracha al mitzvah tzitzis, which the Ramah says is a birchas hashevach, it's a bracha of praise. It's not a bracha on doing the mitzvah. It's even if you're not doing the mitzvah properly, you still can make that bracha. There's such an implication of the Ramah and the Darkei Moshe, which Alter Rebbe brings la halacha. Arguably, things might be different, and there's some strong support for this in a ksavya that we have of the Rebbe. The Rebbe tried to put out, the Rebbe was involved in putting out, which never came out, a kitzur Shulchan Aruch for the youth. In that kitzur Shulchan Aruch for the youth, it talks about different halachas about tzitzis, and there seems to be an implication over there, the same way that if a person slept with a tzitzis, and he doesn't have a tallis gadol, he could just make a bracha without changing. On the same tzitzis that he slept with the night before. Not he changed it in the morning. He has it from the night, and the next morning makes a bracha. The difference between the kitzur Shulchan Aruch for the youth and what the Rebbe Rashab writes is that the kitzur Shulchan Aruch says if you have a tallis gadol, you shouldn't rely on that. The Rebbe Rashab seems to imply you can rely on that even with the tallis gadol, although it's not clear. Maybe he's talking about if you took it off and put it back on. Lamais, it's very hard to pasken on these things. We have a psak of the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, we have a psak of the Alter Rebbe in Siddur. The Torah Shalom Hagoyes that the Rebbe Rashab wrote, he wrote for himself. He writes clearly what he writes is not fitting with the siddur, but he writes, this is the minig. Kimedumali, I think this is the minig. Nowadays, we don't know of such a minig. These hagoyes that Rebbe Rashab wrote to himself on the Kaf HaChaim, which is a Svardi Sefer, and it could be he's following the position, he's writing according to the Svardim, the position of the Svardim of the Bis Yosef is, if you take off tzitzis for 1 minute and put it back on, you can already make a bracha right away. And what the Rebbe wrote in this Kitzur Shulchan Aruch for the youth also is not very clear, so it's hard to prove one way or another from these things. I just want to finish with one more final topic. It's been commonly done recently that people at chuppahs give a kibbud of Birchas Kohanim. There's a rumor that the Rebbe made a comment about this, that maybe looks like people needed a kibbud, but in other words, the Rebbe was saying in jest, why are they calling people up for Kohanim to say Birchas Kohanim? But that is what's done. And the question is, so if a Kohen is there and he says the Kohanim are honor Birchas Kohanim, does he have to go up? There's halacha of Amr Lehem, if the Kohanim are told to go up, they have to go up. Does that apply only in davening, or is a chiyuv to do that even not in the context of davening? The short answer is, no, this is only in davening. The Yerushalmi says, L'matzonu nesis kapayim b'lo tefillah. There's no such thing as duchening outside of davening. So he's not over in anything, it's not during davening. Bechlal, it's a different kind of Birchas Kohanim, they're asking to bench the chassan and Challah. This is not the bench Klal Yisrael. So why are people duchening not during davening? You're not supposed to do duchening without a davening. So that's a question about Kohanim, and it's a question about people who bench their children and they're not Kohanim. If you're not a Kohen, why are you saying them Birchas Kohanim? And one of the answers is because they don't put out their two hands. If you look in the Seder Pidin Aben, a lot of Rishonim, they say the Kohen gives a bracha and he puts one hand on the head of the child. Some of them write that he puts Yodav. It's hard to know Yodav, Yodoi when it's a typo. But some of them write Yodav his hands, and they actually don't bring the Nusach Birchas Kohanim. So if you don't put your hand, or another explanation is you don't have a mind for the mitzvah Birchas Kohanim, you're not following the regular rules, you're not making a bracha, you're not following the bracha before the mitzvah. And it's as if you're having kavanah not for the mitzvah, so as if you're not duchening out of davening, and it's not a non-kohen duchening. That's one of the reasons why we say the pasuk before Veidaber Hashem Moshe Leiman, and we finish with V'sam Moshe B'nei Yisrael. The Rebbe did that as well. It's like the chazan and davening says, it's not part of duchening, it's not l'shem mitzvah. That's why in the siddur we also have an atava in Birchas HaTorah, we also have an atavas chaloim. When someone had a negative dream, they bench them and they use the psuk of Birchas Kohanim. It's not for the mitzvah. They once benched the Rebbe, and the Rebbe commented on Chav Chesivin, this time of the year, Tav Shinun Aleph. The Rebbe commented, you could hear it on the tape, that it makes this comment. The Rebbe said he should start again from the beginning, from Veidaber Hashem, that people shouldn't learn from this and do the wrong thing. So there's a lot of explanations why non-Kohanim do Birchas Kohanim, and we mentioned some of them. You could also say the idea because it's not during davening, it's another explanation. But either way, whichever pshat we say, it's pretty clear. You can't say that if someone asks a kohen to give a bracha, he's mechuyev, and if he refuses, he's doing an aveda. And if we're going to, there's an old kovetz called Tel Talpiyas, and there was a discussion about this. If a kohen is in front of 10 people, so it's a tzibur, and they ask him to give a bracha, and if he doesn't agree, is he over? So one of the writers right over there, a very valid point. If you're going to say that a kohen is mechuyev, that means he has to make a bracha. Clearly, Birchas Kohanim, the kohanim that are called up by a chuppah, are not making a bracha. So clearly that wouldn't be an issue. Mesudas Tevis, Kol Tov.
Join the global halacha learning revolution of the Laman Yilmadu Institute and bring increased brachos into your home. For details about the various learning programs, visit our website, lamanyilmadu.com. That's LEMAANYILMEDU.com.